England, the majority of the population, part of the UK or the Union Jack. Sorry, Wales. And this is France. Calais is the closest city in France from the UK. From Dover, which is the closest to France. 51 miles an hour and a half under the Channel. The both allies. They're both in Europe. They're both in NATO. But sadly the UK is no longer part of the EU because of Brexit. They have warm relations. But what if I tell you it wasn't that in the past? A few centuries ago the England and France used to hate each other a lot. The last major conflict between the two were the Napoleonic Wars, in which coalitions of European powers, financed and usually led by the United Kingdom, fought a series of wars against the First French Empire and its client states, culminating in the defeat of Napoleon at Waterloo in 1815. There were some subsequent tensions, especially after 1880, over such issues as the Suez Canal and rivalry for African colonies. Despite some brief war scares, peace always prevailed. Friendly ties between the two began with the 1904 Entente Cordiale, and the British and French were allied against Germany in both World War I and World War II. In the latter conflict, British armies helped to liberate occupied France from the Nazis. Both nations opposed the Soviet Union during the Cold War and were founding members of NATO, the Western military alliance led by the United States. During the 1960s, French President Charles de Gaulle distrusted the British for being too close to the Americans, and for years he blocked British entry into the European Economic Community, now called the European Union. De Gaulle also pulled France out of its active role in NATO because that alliance was too heavily dominated by Washington. After his death, Britain did enter the European Economic Community and France returned to NATO. In recent years the two countries have experienced a quite close relationship, especially on defense and foreign policy issues. The two countries tend, however, to disagree on a range of other matters, most notably the European Union. France and Britain are often still referred to as historic rivals too, or with emphasis on the perceived everlasting competition that still opposes the two countries. French author José Alain Furlan characterized the relationship between the countries by describing the British as our most dear enemies. Unlike France, the United Kingdom left the European Union in 2020, after it voted to do so in a referendum held on 23 June 2016. It is estimated that about 350,000 French people live in the UK, with approximately 400,000 Britons living in France. I forgot to say this: the English and French were engaged in numerous wars in the following centuries. They took opposite sides in all of the Italian wars between 1494 and 1559. An even deeper division set in during the English Reformation, when most of England converted to Protestantism and France remained Roman Catholic. This enabled each side to see the other as not only a foreign evil but also a heretical one. In both countries there was intense civil religious conflict. Because of the oppression by Roman Catholic King Louis XIII of France, many Protestant Huguenots fled to England. Similarly, many Catholics fled from England to France. Scotland had a very close relationship with France in the 16th century, with intermarriage at the highest level. Henry VIII of England had initially sought an alliance with France, and the Field of the Cloth of Gold saw a face-to-face meeting between him and King Francis I of France. Mary, Queen of Scots, 1542-1587, was born to King James V and his French second wife, Mary of Guise, and became queen when her father was killed in the wars with England. Her mother became regent, brought in French advisors, and ruled Scotland in the French style. David Ditchburn and Alastair MacDonald argue, Protestantism was, however, given an enormous boost in Scotland, especially among the governing classes, by the suffocating political embrace of Catholic France. The threat to Scotland's independence seemed to come most potently from France, not England. And absorption by France was not a future that appealed to Scots. 22 Queen Elizabeth I, whose own legitimacy was challenged by Mary Queen of Scots, worked with the Protestant Scottish lords to expel the French from Scotland in 1560-23. The Treaty of Edinburgh in 1560 virtually ended the Auld Alliance. Protestant Scotland tied its future to Protestant England, rejecting Catholic France. However, friendly relations at the business level did continue. 24 and Hundred Years' War, an important period in the history of France. The 100 Years' War actually lasted longer than 100 years. Starting in 1337 and finishing with an English victory in 1000. And smash that like button, comment and subscribe. But anyways, this is me out.